This is A Course in Miracles, Manual for Teachers, Part 25, Are Psychic Powers Desirable? The answer to this question is much like the preceding one. There are, of course, no unnatural powers, and it is obviously merely an appeal to magic to make up a power that does not exist. It is equally obvious, however, that each individual has many abilities of which he is unaware. As his awareness increases, he may well develop abilities that seem quite startling to him. Yet nothing he can do can compare, even in the slightest, with the glorious surprise of remembering who he is. Let all his learning and all his efforts be directed toward this one great final surprise, and he will not be content to be delayed by the little ones that may come to him on the way. Certainly there are many psychic powers that are clearly in line with this course. Communication is not limited to the small range of channels the world recognizes. If it were, there would be little point in trying to teach salvation. It would be impossible to do so. The limits the world places on communication are the chief barriers to direct experience of the Holy Spirit, whose presence is always there and whose voice is available but for the hearing. These limits are placed out of fear, for without them the walls that surround all the separate places of the world would fall at the holy sound of his voice. Who transcends these limits in any way is merely becoming more natural. He is doing nothing special, and there is no magic in his accomplishments. The seemingly new abilities that may be gathered on the way can be very helpful. Given to the Holy Spirit and used under his direction, they are valuable teaching aids. To this, the question of how they arise is irrelevant. The only important consideration is how they are used. Taking them as ends in themselves, no matter how this is done, will delay progress. Nor does their value lie in proving anything. Achievements from the past, unusual attunement with the unseen, or special favors from God. God gives no special favors, and no one has any powers that are not available to everyone. Only by tricks of magic are special powers demonstrated. Nothing that is genuine is used to deceive. The Holy Spirit is incapable of deception, and he can use only genuine abilities. What is used for magic is useless to him. But what he uses cannot be used for magic. There is, however, a particular appeal in unusual abilities that can be curiously tempting. Here are strengths which the Holy Spirit wants and needs, yet the ego sees in these same strengths an opportunity to glorify itself. Strengths turned to weakness are tragedy indeed, yet what is not given to the Holy Spirit must be given to weakness, for what is withheld from love is given to fear, and will be fearful in consequence. Even those who no longer value the material things of the world may still be deceived by psychic powers. As investment has been withdrawn from the world's material gifts, the ego has been seriously threatened. It may still be strong enough to rally under the new temptation to win back strength by guile. Many have not seen through the ego's defenses here, although they are not particularly subtle. Yet, given a remaining wish to be deceived, deception is made easy. Now the power is no longer a genuine ability, and cannot be used dependably. It is almost inevitable that, unless the individual changes his mind about its purpose, he will bolster his powers uncertainties with increasing deception. Any ability that anyone develops has a potentiality for good. To this there is no exception, and the more unusual and unexpected the power, the greater its potential usefulness. Salvation has need of all abilities, for what the world would destroy, the Holy Spirit would restore. Psychic abilities have been used to call upon the devil, which merely means to strengthen the ego. Yet, here is also a great channel of hope and healing in the Holy Spirit's service. Those who have developed psychic powers have simply let some of the limitations they laid upon their minds be lifted. It can be but further limitations they lay upon themselves if they utilize their increased freedom for greater imprisonment. The Holy Spirit needs these gifts, and those who offer them to him and him alone go with Christ's gratitude upon their hearts and his holy sight not far behind. I'm excited to talk about this one. It's obvious, it says here, that each individual has many abilities of which he is unaware. As his awareness increases, he may well develop abilities that seem quite startling to him. Yet nothing he can do can compare, even in the slightest, with the glorious surprise of remembering who he is. Let all his learning and all his efforts be directed toward this one great final surprise, and he will not be content to be delayed by the little ones that may come to him on the way. Yes. So this reminds me a lot of Felipe and me and our theta healing journey. So basically, Felipe and I, we started learning theta healing together in 2015, and we were so focused on that. But at the same time, we were also reading the course, and Felipe in particular had a really hard time trying to reconcile some of these things, because what theta healing teaches and what Vienna teaches is that ultimately the seventh plane, i.e. God, is the focus, and realizing that we as humans perceive ourselves as very much here, and all of this is very much real. In the basic book, it says that anything other than the seventh plane, i.e. anything other than God, is illusory. But yet there's a lot of information about psychic abilities, about increasing your psychic powers, and how to use it, how to channel it, how to work with different beings from different planes, all sorts of different things like that. And Felipe, being more of a sort of purist, when we were teaching, and particularly there were different exercises where you open up the energy centers of your energy body, so that you can increase your psychic abilities, your sense of clairvoyance, clairsentience, clairaudience, all of the psychic abilities, to open it up. And for me personally, I find it really fun and amazing. And when I remember when I did my very first reading, my intuitive reading, and it worked, and it just blew my mind that I had that capability. And then another level was when we started teaching this and seeing that it worked, that other people had that experience as well. And it's that we have these abilities that we're just not aware of. And it says this, that who transcends these limits in any ways, merely becoming more natural. He's doing nothing special, and there is no magic in his accomplishments. So it's basically that we all have this ability. We all have these psychic abilities. It's just when we're in the process of uncovering them and seeing them for the first time, it's really exciting. And it seems like something new that we're gaining, but it's rather that we're removing all the limitations to be able to have some of the abilities that we normally have that are natural. And so yeah, the sort of debate between me and Felipe was that he didn't want to teach that. He didn't see the usefulness in teaching that, because his path, it has been more in alignment with the course, which is just directly to the point. But for me, my experience is that you meet people where they are, and like keeping my focus on the sort of end goal, but realizing that for me, it's really useful to be able to open up and realize our abilities, because that's like the step. It's the next step that we need to take in realizing our full potential. And as it says here, as his awareness increases, he may well develop abilities that seem quite startling, yet nothing he can do can compare, even in the slightest, with the glorious surprise of remembering who he is. And so let all his learning and all his efforts be directed toward this one great final surprise, and he will not be content to be delayed by the little ones that may come to him on the way. And realizing that, opening up to these abilities is just a step as part of the path. And for me, I've had actually a lot of fun in learning all the different theta healing courses, and there's basically different levels and different degrees of the kinds of abilities that you can develop. And to me, I find it really useful to be able to experience those abilities, because it's kind of, it means that I don't have the limitations in my mind anymore. And for some people, they can just go straight to God. They don't need to have any experiences of any psychic anything to know that that's real. But for others, it's actually necessary or important to pass through the process of opening up and experiencing these abilities. And that's been part of my path. But knowing that at some point I might not need those anymore. Yeah. And it says, the limits the world places on communication are the chief barriers to direct experience of the Holy Spirit, whose presence is always there and whose voice is available but for the hearing. And I remember I did a session not very long ago, and one of the comments was about how the woman was amazed at how I follow guidance so much. And for me, most of that training has been through the course, where I learned not to make decisions for myself, because what's the point if I tried to override what's for my plan, what's for my highest good? Because I can always trust that the Holy Spirit or God or whatever label you want to give that is always going to know better than my thinking mind, than my ego mind. And with enough practice, we can actually live from that all the time. And it's when that becomes the norm, then it seems in a way so backwards, and it seems like such a struggle to not live like that. And I used to live like that. And I'm really grateful that I have learned how to ask, to follow guidance, to listen to that deep inner knowing, that inner teacher that we all have. But yeah, it says the seemingly new abilities that may be gathered on the way can be very helpful. The only important consideration is how they are used. Taking them as ends in themselves, no matter how this is done, will delay progress. Nor does their value lie in proving anything. Achievements from the past, unusual attunement with the unseen, or special favors from God. God gives no special favors, and no one has any powers that are not available to anyone. And that is something that I also very much appreciate with Vayana's teachings, because I know that it's in alignment with that she knows that everyone has these abilities, and it gives people the framework to be able to open up to it, to the abilities. Something that I'll just use one example, like say telekinesis. Telekinesis is moving objects with your mind. And before I had taken theta healing, some part of me knew that I could do it. I just didn't know how. I remember watching like Matilda or other movies where people could move objects with their minds. Obviously, there are special effects, but when I saw it, I just had this knowing that, like, I think I can do that. But you know, the way that we're taught and a lot of the learning actually kind of blocks a lot of our natural abilities. And when I finally learned and got to actually do it in one of the more advanced theta healing courses, it really liberated me from something. It made me feel like there was some confirmation that we have abilities beyond what we have been taught. And I'm grateful for that. And it's definitely been useful, because it takes, at least in my experience, it took me more into a place of trust, of knowing that there's something greater than what we have been taught or what has been given in this world. And by having these little milestones of new abilities and ways that we can have these powers, these psychic abilities, to me is just pointing the way that there's more in store for us along the way. It says, any ability that anyone develops has the potentiality for good. And the more unusual and unexpected the power, the greater its potential usefulness. Those who have developed psychic powers have simply let some of the limitations they laid upon their minds be lifted. I personally enjoy using my psychic abilities. I can choose when to use it or not, and I find it useful. And the point of it and the point of developing it, or really taking off the layers to be able to access it, the point of it for me is for it to be useful for the ultimate goal, for my ultimate purpose here. And I would be curious to know about other people and what their experience has been with their psychic abilities and uncovering them. So don't be shy. Write in the comments. Let's have a conversation. Bye for now.